Hello everyone, a cup of tea with Auntie Winnie here. It's morning where I am, and it's always a pleasure to start the day with a hot cup of tea. This is how we were brought up. We used to take tea early in the morning, and it had to be steaming hot, like this cup of tea right here. Let me just take a sip. Oh, yummy. This tea has been made with lots of love, and it has got all of life's pleasures, great ingredients that are healthy for the body, like ground ginger, rosemary, and of course, a lot of tea leaves. Where I come from, tea is tea leaves. Without tea leaves, there's no tea. I love tea with milk, but the tea leaves has to be more than the milk, and then the other ingredients follow. So this is Winnie, the music educator also, and this is another episode of A Cup of Tea with Auntie Winnie, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you, talk to the young people, of this generation, talk to my peers, with my peers, and discuss some of these things that we grew up doing. And today what comes in my mind is a very important aspect of life, basically a social value that we grew up with. And this value was ingrained in us so much that even as adults now, and with now as parents of the younger generation people, we still live by the tenets of this upbringing. And I don't know how you would feel about this, but I personally think it's worth a discussion, especially with how the moral values have changed nowadays. And see whether it's something that can be brought back or adopted, or just something about it that can help the younger generation to do better when it comes to their social interactions. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about how when we were growing up as children, we were brought up to interact with older people in our generation. In this regard, you have an authority. Anyone who is maybe about your parents' age, and even not going too far, just in the household. I don't know how many households nowadays don't practice this, or maybe you might not be able to relate. You let me know in the comments. But we grew up when we were children, because most of the households we grew up in had actually quite a number of children. In my household, we were 6 children. And so I being the firstborn, we had quite a number of others, and so the age gap was not that big. And obviously my parents were working parents, and we needed to have a live-in. We used to call them a live-in house helpers those days, to just be able to help manage the home and us as children and do the household chores. And one of the things, how we were brought up with these people, because I find it very different nowadays, they became part of the family. So if you had a living house helper, you adopted them. They were adopted as part of the family, and we were required to call them auntie if it was a female house helper. So the house helper was part of the family, and we were asked to interact with them with a lot of respect. What do I mean? We had to help out with house chores. The house helper was in charge of doing the house chores, which she was paid for. But regardless of that, we still had, as children of the homestead, we were still assigned duties that we had to follow through. Obviously, we had to go to school, and most of the times we would go to school and then come home for lunch. Do some trekking for some kilometers, come home with your mom for lunch. Like in my case, my mom was a teacher where we were going to school, where we went to school in primary school. So we would all walk back home at lunchtime, warm our own food, serve, and then take the dishes to the kitchen. We might not have needed to wash at that time because we had to go back to school. Maybe we just had an hour and a half. In fact, I'm just wondering how long lunch hours used to be, because we used to walk, and it was quite a distance. Home, eat, and then go back to school. Then we come back home at about 4 p.m. and we had to obviously clean up, from get out of the school uniform, make tea, and we had a house helper. So there is that level of work that they would do, but then we also were assigned duties to help. So we wouldn't have situations where, for example, even if she served you tea and maybe a snack to eat, as we were much younger then, you were required, after you finish eating, you take your things to the kitchen, and probably one of you, depending on age and whether you could be able to do that work. As we grew older, what actually eventually happened is that I remember when I became 10, I had younger siblings, probably 13. It reached a point where my mom said, okay, now you're old enough to be able to run the house affairs. And the other siblings, if the age gaps are between 2-3 years, we were able to be assigned duties to do maybe during the weekends. Then it reached a point where we didn't need to have a house helper at all. So we had to take care of the household ourselves. But even when they were there was a way we used to treat them. They were part of the family, and they were an authority. So we needed to give them a lot of respect. We needed to address them in a way that was not diminishing to them or their duties. And that is something sometimes I wonder whether we should incorporate that in the society today, because I see how young children, when they call them nowadays, they're called nannies, and when they're with their nannies, they a lot of times they really disrespect them, to the extent even some of them even hit the nannies. I've seen those situations where I've gone in homes to teach young children, or even just that whole thing of lack of responsibility. You find a child is served everything. A child who's old enough. When I was 10 years old, I was able to even cook some meals for the family, and that's how we grew up. Everyone had to learn how to cook, how to wash clothes, your innerwears. You had to wash those by yourself. Nobody was going to do that for you. Those are private things. And honestly, I feel as a mom now, as an adult, an older adult in the society right now, that was good upbringing. We were made responsible at an early age. We knew how to keep our personal hygiene. We knew how to keep our private space private and do our things in a certain way, where we didn't have to expose everything to everyone in the name of, we have somebody to wash for us those things. And that way, even as we grew older and we had to probably, like I went to boarding school in high school, it was very easy to adapt. I already knew how to take care of myself, and that responsibility of how to take care of your things, how to respect other people's things. So it's something that I keep wondering whether we can do better with the younger generation now, with the children now. Just really bring them up to speed on how to be responsible and respect those people who take care of them. In the past episodes, I've talked about like how to respect teachers, how to respect relatives who come home. And today I just thought about those people, the caregivers who come home to give care and to take care of the household when parents have gone to work, when the children have gone to school, but they still live with us. How do we treat them? And it's a concern for me now, because I see this trend has really gotten out of hand. This trend of disrespecting those who take care of our children at home, and then obviously it also extends to other social spaces. Like now you find most of the children nowadays, even when they're addressing, as I said, in class, teachers or other adults who might be the same age as their parents, they are very disrespectful. And one of the things that I laugh about, I would never ever address my own, for example, teacher with their first names. It was always Miss So, Mr. So, Mrs. So, and the same thing as I said with the house managers. You say auntie, not because they're blood relatives, but just a sign of a title of respect. And I think it worked very, very well. That does not mean there's some people who say, if you call a house manager or a nanny auntie, it confuses the children. Really? I think I want to differ with that, because in my own household, the way I've brought up my two children, they've always respected the house helpers who have come to help them, and I see it has helped shape their characters. So even when they go to school, as they've grown older, almost into adulthood, you will see the way they treat people of authority around them, adults, older people. And I think it's something that I would love to see being adopted in now today's society, today's generation of young people. I'd like parents to engage me in this, people of authority in spaces where you're bringing up children, or what have you seen yourself out there when you're visit maybe a nursing hospital and you're trying to treat a child. How do you find that the younger people in this generation are disrespectful, or it's okay how things are? I think one of the things that I can add value on, one of the ways we maintained or that social value of respecting older people in the society in terms of discipline was that if you wronged a person who was an authority, your parents, the first thing they would do, most of the times they would ask you why you did it. Yes, you'd have a conversation, but then there was a bigger repercussion. There was a certain way we were disciplined, and it was just not by mouth. We had to be caned. So the caning comes into this episode. What do you feel about being caned? We were caned. Yes, there are pros and cons of that, but the reality is, and psychologists have said this, that a child of a certain age, the way they reason, their reasoning capacity is not that big. Usually the reasoning, even if it's concentration, the child concentrates half of their age. So if a child is 5 years, the only time they only can concentrate 2.5 minutes at a time. What that means is that most of the times they'll keep getting into some funny spaces and doing funny things. And how do you reason with that child and tell them, stop misbehaving? You're just talking, like you're talking as if you're peers. How does that work in terms of disciplining? I don't know, but I feel maybe to some extent, it's not, I wouldn't call it like fully fledged corporal punishment, but I think, a little bit of caning, is something that I would approve right now in this generation, in terms of bringing up children who are more disciplined, who are more respectful, and just teaching them also how to address other people in the spaces where of authority, where they have either it's a teacher or a nanny, anyone who is supposed to give them some instructions so that things can get done, because it can be very frustrating. As a teacher, I'm mostly very frustrated when I'm teaching young kids nowadays, and the level of disrespect is high, and I feel it's because there are no repercussions. You can't cane. Our teachers caned us, and they had that mandate. We are still alive to tell the tales, and I think it was for the better at that time. It can go excessive and everything. Too much of anything is poisonous. But I think within control, some of these things I feel would be good to bring back, where we rethink as a society, how are we going to bring up our children, the young people, so that even now when they transition from school to the marketplace, I had a workshop on this. They already have social values that can endear them to would-be employers. We are having a big problem now. When I'm looking for young people to employ now, it's difficult because some of these things, they don't have them deep-seated. Where do I start from? Do I start teaching you social values like discipline, respecting, your workplace, respecting your boss? Where do we start from? And yet there is work that needs to be done. So it becomes a bit difficult. Something to think about. I'm interested in hearing your opinions about this, and what we can do better, where we have failed, and is there hope? And even the younger people in the society, maybe I'm misreading or you've been misunderstood. I'd like to hear your comments. And if you like this episode and you think there's something to learn from here, please feel free to like, share, besides commenting. And I'm really happy to have you as an audience listening to me and being able to give your own input. And I can't wait for the next episode, which will also be from your own comments. Whatever you comment there, if you want to hear a little bit about our growing up during our times when we were young and you'd like me to address that, I would be so happy to just give my insights, the wisdom of growing up, and then we partner that way. But thank you for listening in, and I look forward to seeing you soon again in the next episode of A Cup of Tea with Auntie Winnie. Bye.